The answer to the question is the stock market about to crash? And I think the answer is yes. So Bitcoin would cut through that 6,000 resistance pretty easily, cut and make new all-time highs.
Yeah.
I think we're going to see that. When it gets through this area, there's very little supply between 6,000 and 20,000. There's
Mhm.
not a lot of Bitcoin out there. So any amount of demand will take us to new all-time highs.
Hello and welcome to a Cheppy Today special. I'm Will, and today I was lucky enough to interview broadcaster and Bitcoin bull Max Keiser. We spoke on everything from his 100k Bitcoin prediction to the Binance hack, as well as the reason why he believes that all altcoins will eventually die off. Here it is. Thank you, Max, for joining us today.
Yeah, sure, no problem.
Unavoidably, we have to talk about the Binance hack today,
Yeah.
which is kind of crazy timing having you on. But yeah, 7,000 BTC was stolen from the exchange, and we wondered what your thoughts were on that and the idea that came up from that of a Bitcoin reorganization.
It's interesting because the Bitcoin price seems unaffected.
Yes.
We saw this also with the Bitfinex news of recently. There was some controversy there, and also price was unaffected.
Mhm.
So this shows that Bitcoin is maturing in a big way. I remember, of course, when we've been involved in Bitcoin since 2011, and when this type of thing would happen, there would be a huge price correction, famously with Mt. Gox. Mt. Gox collapsed and the price took 4 or 5 years to recover. So here, these things are happening and the price is virtually unaffected. It shows a lot of maturity in the space, and it shows that we're moving beyond a period now when these types of hacks have any real impact on the price at all. So that's the first major piece of good news. The second part of the question about the reorg, it's funny that CZ has done so well in this Bitcoin space, apparently without really knowing how Bitcoin works. But I think now he understands a little bit more how it works. The idea of the reorg is a non-starter for obvious reasons. And so, yeah, that's kind of meaningless nonsense as well.
Mm-hmm. I think the idea actually came from Jeremy Rubin, right? So he brought it up and said that he could basically just target the hacker's transaction and reverse it. And obviously, it's caused more outrage than the hack itself, it seems.
Yeah, the protocol would reject that. The protocol has its own internal intelligence and it rejects stupidity. So that's never going to happen.
Okay. And I think you're perhaps known best for your show, the Keiser Report, but more recently, or for a long time, really, your predictions on Bitcoin. And the prediction that it's ultimately going to 100k. Some people have called it quite conservative, but we wondered where those figures are coming from, how it's still on track, and what's the best case scenario for Bitcoin's future in your mind?
Right. So we made this call back in 2011
Mm-hmm.
when Bitcoin was $1. I very publicly said that we think it can go to 100,000, and this is based on Bitcoin capturing at a minimum 1 or 2% of the global forex market. So the global forex market is a $5 trillion per day market. We think that Bitcoin would capture at least 1% of that market. So you extrapolate the backwards, and you come up with a target of 100,000. So that's been our target now since 2011, and we think it's on track to hit that number. And we don't see any reason why it won't be hitting that number. As far as where it goes beyond that, yeah, if it gets to, let's say, a market equivalent to gold, then the price would be 3 or 4 times higher than that. So, which is no reason why I couldn't get there as well. But I'm just kind of focused on this $100,000 number. It's a good place to focus. And we do so with Heisenberg Capital, which is our venture capital fund.
Mm-hmm.
We've been in business since 2013, and that's been our position since 2013. And we are Bitcoin maximalists for the most part. And so we're just kind of using it as a way to focus our energies to good target for us to work toward.
And do you see a time frame for that?
I don't like to put a time. I don't like to put a date on it because I
Mm,
think that the community gets is not served well when people put a date on their predictions, because then the community tries to time it, and market timing is almost always a losing idea.
sure.
So, it's going to 100,000. It's currently, approximately 6,000. That's a big move. So there's
Yeah.
no scenario you can come up with where you're not going to be outperforming every other asset class in the world. That's the bottom line. So don't try to time it. Just, get into it. The Cash App by over there
Square.
by
Yeah.
Square is such an ingenious, user-friendly app, and it's so easy to just keep buying Bitcoin every single day. Stack Sats every day.
Mhm.
Stack Sats every day. We're getting to 100,000. And don't try to time it. Market timing is for losers.
It's a good way of putting it. Yeah, fair enough. And flipping the tables a little bit, what would be your worst case scenario for the future of Bitcoin, do you think?
I have no case scenario for Bitcoin. I do have a worst case scenario for humans, though.
Okay, then go ahead.
I think that getting to 100,000, I'm not sure humans are going to be around to see that number, because the rate of ecological degradation is rapidly increasing. And humans face an extinction event, and that's coming up pretty quickly. Whereas Bitcoin does not have the same problems. Bitcoin protocol can continue hashing by sucking up solar energy from solar panels, et cetera. It doesn't need humans. And so I don't have any problems with Bitcoin, but I'm not sure humans will survive as a species to see that day.
Right. Wow. That's quite bleak.
Well, it's just part of the design.
Yeah.
I think it's just the protocol. If you look at an algorithm, it's not bleak or cheerful. It is what it is.
That's very true. And speaking of gold, as you did the comparison between Bitcoin and gold, we recently had the Drop Gold campaign from Grayscale, and the World Council kind of responding to it, saying that Bitcoin is too volatile to overtake gold. What would you say in response to this? Do you see the volatility easing off, regulation coming in and making it? What's your ideas on that?
But my first reaction would be that gold needs better marketing.
Right.
In other words, the problem with gold is that nobody's marketing gold. They're just saying that it's great and you should own it. And if you don't own it, that's not great. I mean, that's it. That's their whole marketing. And so gold for thousands of years has never had to market itself, but now it does because it has a competitor.
Hmm.
So gold needs to come up with better marketing. There's a lot of ways. The Drop Gold campaign by Barry Silbert over there at his firm, Grayscale, is fantastic marketing. It's a fantastic campaign. It's going to get 1 million views. He's all over the financial press. It's gotten a lot of press attention. And there are ways the Gold Council or the Gold community could respond with a similar type of ad that would be just as successful. But they refuse to accept the fact that they need to start marketing better. And I've had this discussion with a lot of people in the gold community, because we've been involved with the gold community even longer than we've been involved with the Bitcoin community.
Right.
And they simply don't believe they need to market their product. And that's false. There's, in a world of 0% interest rates, everything needs a marketing plan.
Okay. And in terms of Bitcoin not living up to gold standard because of its volatility, what would you say to that?
I would say that it's less volatile than a lot of other currencies out there. So it's a non-issue. It's as Bitcoin transitions from store of value to medium of exchange to unit of account, it will have above average volatility. In my view, one of the reasons why we do pick $100,000 as a price target is that we see the volatility at that point flattening out tremendously, so that you might have 1 or 2% variations over 6-month periods of time. But by then, it'll be more of a medium of exchange, and it'll be more integrated into the global forex market, and the volatility will subside. So it's going this trip from $1 to $100,000 in a fairly compressed amount of time. Clearly, is going to have some volatility,
Sure.
but I wouldn't say that it therefore should be ignored in favor of gold, because gold, at the very best possible scenario will increase by maybe 3 or 4x. In the case of Bitcoin, obviously that number is substantially higher.
Hmm.
And if you've been in securities business for 35 years, I worked on Wall Street for many years at many firms and have a very successful career on Wall Street. And volatility and opportunity go together. Just look at the options market. The options pricing formula is based on volatility. So volatility is just a component in that are used to assess returns on investment. It's not good or bad. It's simply something that goes into the formula. But you have to step back and look at the bigger picture and say, where are we going to be in 5 years? Am I willing to accept greater volatility in my Bitcoin versus gold and make 10 to 20 times more? Yeah, I think so. Sure, why not?
Yeah, and but I suppose you run the risk of well, risk, and that's it, isn't it? Really, it's a riskier asset for the volatility.
Not
Um,
over time. It depends what
right.
your time. If you have an investing horizon of 5 to 10 years, then the risk versus gold drops down to near parity.
Right. Well, I'll take your word for that. And one person that probably wouldn't agree with you is Warren Buffett, who recently called Bitcoin a gambling device, and he's another big proponent against gold as well. He's never really invested. What would you say to his comments on Bitcoin recently?
Well, okay. So Warren's investing vehicle, Berkshire Hathaway,
Mm.
it's been compounding at roughly 21% a year is the rate of return that they've been able to achieve of their Berkshire Hathaway. So now remove the bailout of 2008 when the US government bailed out Berkshire Hathaway. So take that out of the equation and remove the effect of stock buybacks, which up until recently was illegal for obvious reasons. It's an accounting fraud. So if you remove those two items from Warren's performance, you end up not with a 21% annualized rate of return, but negative rate of return. He would be losing money for people. So he's in no position to comment about anything. He's a freeloader. He exists at the pleasure of the U.S. government, who gives him lots of money printed over there through their various quantitative easing schemes. He's a freeloader, and essentially he's like one of these old bums that hoard paper in their closet, old newspapers, and they have a lot of cats running around, and he's a sociopath essentially.
Wow, that's a strong view on Warren Buffett. I mean, yeah, fair enough. A bum, a millionaire, a billionaire bum, I guess.
Well, it's fiat money billionaire. So you have to
Yes,
ask
yeah,
yourself,
true.
in 5 years, it might not, that might be worth the same thing as the currency in Venezuela. As
Very true.
you notice, they're dumping dump trucks full of Venezuelan bolivars onto the street as trash.
Yeah.
But this is exactly the same value as Berkshire Hathaway. It's
So
complete. It's complete confetti. It's not. I wouldn't use it to line a bird cage.
yeah, wow. I mean, I did actually see a video of you recently ripping up US dollars on a live interview, which I was kind of hoping
Yeah.
you'd do for us today. But
Well, I've ripped up a lot of fiat money over the years.
yeah.
Many thousands of dollars I've ripped up because I want to get people's attention to the fact that fiat money has no value. It's
Mhm.
just paper.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I am in agreement with you there. We're slightly moving on now to altcoins, and
Yeah.
you are a maximalist. You've admitted that yourself, and you share the view that altcoins will eventually die out. And there are some pretty dodgy projects out there, but do you fully stand by that? Do you still think that everything's going to die out except for Bitcoin?
There's nothing any altcoin can do that Bitcoin can't do now or won't be able to do in the near future. So
Okay.
there's no need for them. They're superfluous. They add nothing to the market. So the market will reject them. I believe the market will reject them. That's our view at Heisenberg Capital, and that's how we allocate our capital. So that's our overriding view at Heisenberg Capital, that the Bitcoin and the market will reject all altcoins as being superfluous and unnecessary. That's our view. And so that's how we allocate our capital.
And
Now that's our position. So I mean, there
right.
are people who have different opinions and different positions, and it's a big market out there, and nobody has a monopoly on ideas, and nobody is, I mean, we could be wrong, but I mean, that's our position.
Okay, it's interesting. Kind of just digressing slightly here. It's interesting. We had the Binance hack today, and I wanted to hear your thoughts a little bit further on the Bitfinex Tether situation, which people are now calling Bitfinex the new MT-Gox. What do you think of this fiasco? Will it impact on Bitcoin eventually? We haven't seen anything just yet, but do you think it will?
Well, first of all, we are investors in Bitfinex, so we have a position in Bitfinex, full
Right.
disclosure. And if you examine the history of Bitfinex and their problems, it's because of the cartel behavior of banks. And we've run into this often. Banks are not allowing for a free enterprise to exist in the form of Bitcoin. So they have they've put up barriers to entry. And the history of Bitfinex is they've not been able to find banking facilities. And so this has forced them to go down alternative routes. And that's where the problems arise. The company itself has not been involved in any transgressions per se. They've just been trying to overcome the fact that we have an entrenched oligopoly of corrupt bankers who don't like the idea of competition and attack anybody who tries to compete with them. That's the problem Bitfinex is having, and I think they will overcome these problems, and I have confidence that they will do well.
Do you worry about Tether being not fully backed as it says it was?
Well, again, if you look at the history of this and the statements being made and the history of interacting with the banking system, the that statement has room for discussion and debate. What that statement actually means. What I will say is this: the banking system has made it very difficult for Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies to exist, and ultimately they will be disintermediated out of existence. So Bitfinex is a ramming rod into the heart of the banking industry that needs to be destroyed. The banking industry is like the Death Star in Star Wars. Bitfinex is like Luke Skywalker. And with a direct hit into the core of the bank Death Star, they will be destroyed.
Well, okay, I like the analogy. Um, very good. All right, and you have been a Bitcoin advocate for quite some time, and you called it the currency of resistance back on the Keiser Report as early as 2011, I believe. And do you still prescribe to this idea? I'm getting the idea you do, but I must ask.
Yes, we have been talking about the global insurrection against banker occupation, or GIABO, for almost 15 years. And during that time, we've seen the Occupy Wall Street, the revolution in Cairo, the emergence of Bitcoin, which is part of the global insurrection against banker occupation. It's a response. If you look at the Genesis block, it makes a direct reference to
Mhm.
bailout
Yeah,
banks
the Times.
by
Yeah.
the chancellor. And we've seen social unrest. We've seen the Yellow Vest movement in France currently. We've seen the indignatos in Spain, and we've seen this global insurrection against banker occupation. And now, what this global occupation against banker occupation needs is a form of hard money to conduct their business, and Bitcoin offers that hard money to them. So it is the currency of the resistance, resisting against the global banking occupation.
Mhm.
So it is emerging as the go-to currency of resistance. It's the currency of the global revolution, and it's becoming more so every single day.
Okay, and I know you don't like timeframes, and understandably so, but do you think this currency of resistance will happen before we all die out?
Well, as a human, I'm gonna take the approach of optimism
Hmm.
and say yes.
Yeah,
I would like to survive the eco apocalypse,
sure. Yeah,
but there's no guarantees, though. I mean, we need to smarten up pretty quickly.
agreed. Yeah. Yeah, a lot has changed since the early days of Bitcoin. You've seen most of it, I imagine. In terms of the community, what has most changed about the community around cryptocurrencies, Bitcoin, in your eyes?
The Bitcoin community is an interesting community because, in many ways, it's a combination of the worst tendencies of the penny stock market, combined with the worst tendencies of the hacker community.
Mhm.
So you put those two together, and you end up with a very toxic brew.
It's one way of
And
describing it.
that is the majority of the Bitcoin community is, I would say, comes from this pool of toxicity of malevolent hackers mixed with boiler room penny stock scammers. That unfortunately is the core of the Bitcoin community. There's Bitcoin derangement syndrome is real. The protocol, if you stare at it too long, it can drive you insane. So you have a few examples of that. Craig Wright obviously has been driven insane.
Yeah.
Roger Ver also is bordering on insanity. He's talking absolute drivel. Bitcoin Cash is a non-starter, it's total garbage, and yet he's clinging on to the Bitcoin derangement syndrome in a very sad way. Mike Hearn, going back a few years, rage quit the community because he suffered from Bitcoin derangement syndrome. John McAfee also has Bitcoin derangement syndrome. He was already unstable to begin with, and then Bitcoin drove him over the edge. He's become the Colonel Kurtz of crypto. He lives in an isolated bungalow somewhere, fighting off natives.
I believe
He's
it's a boat,
gone.
actually.
Yeah, he's gone completely insane. And so you see this throughout, and a lot of these people are dying off. So a friend of mine, Matthew Mellon, who's a billionaire heir to the Mellon banking fortune, who I more or less introduced to Bitcoin, he then went insane and died. He's now dead. So Bitcoin derangement syndrome is a killer, and it's already killed off some folks in the community. But that's the way the protocol works. It will get rid of any potential threats. So anyone who's seen as a threat will die off, and that includes individuals who have BDS. It includes altcoins that will implode, and it'll take down economists like Joseph Stiglitz, who went on very publicly made an ass of himself, probably stupid things. Peter Schiff is coming around. It seems like I've known Peter Schiff for many years, and I think he's too smart to allow himself to be killed by Bitcoin derangement syndrome. I think he's going to come under the Bitcoin tent very soon. My other friend, James Rickards, who wrote a lot of fine books, I think he's going to go down with Bitcoin derangement syndrome. He's probably not going to make it. Frances Coppola over there in England, she's an economist, academic, who will probably not make it. I don't think she'll last more than a few more years. She seems to allowing herself to go completely insane to the point of utter self-extermination. So this is the risk people take when they fight the protocol. I don't know if you saw in the UK, there was a big hit on Netflix called Bird Box.
I've heard of it. I didn't watch it.
Yeah, it's a movie about humans have this existential threat. If they see this force that's out there in the woods, it somehow they're convinced instantly to kill themselves.
Sure.
And that is Bitcoin derangement syndrome. People who look at the protocol too intently, it's like Medusa. You can go insane, and sometimes it's instantly, and sometimes it takes a while. But you must respect the protocol or die by the protocol.
Wow, that's quite a dire prognosis, really.
It is what it is. It's just look in the code. It's open. It's open source. I just look at the code. It's right there. You just read it. Read the white paper. It's right. It's there. It's all there.
Right, and this I don't know if this is the best one to ask you, really, but we're waiting for Bitcoin to break through resistance, right, at 6K. Do you think we'll see that anytime soon?
Yeah, because look at the price action against the stock market volatility. You want to talk about volatility? Bitcoin against the stock market is less volatile so far in 2019. So why is the stock market so volatile? Because it's built on a house of cards called the global central banking system. And that's falling apart again like it did in 2008. So Bitcoin is a risk-off safe haven. It wasn't always perceived as such, but now people are coming to realize that Bitcoin, like gold, is a safe haven to park your funds in periods of extreme volatility like you're seeing in the stock market. And so the answer to the question is the stock market about to crash? And I think the answer is yes. So Bitcoin would cut through that 6,000 resistance pretty easily, cut and make new all-time highs. Yeah. I think we're going to see that. When it gets through this area, there's very little supply between 6,000 and 20,000. There's
Hmm.
not a lot of Bitcoin out there. So any amount of demand will take us to new all-time highs. Then the question is, how high will this surge go before we have another correction? Could be any kind of even minor correction.
Hmm.
But I think that would be at the 28,000 level. So
Sure.
you'd see a move to 28,000, and then you might see a bit of a pullback before the next major move up. I have confidence that banks are going to continue to commit mass suicide, and therefore Bitcoin goes higher.
But you think we need to see a stock market crash for us to get through resistance right now? Is that how much we need? Is that what we need behind us?
Well, it's not much.
Yeah,
It's like an avalanche that only needs one snowflake.
sure. But do you think
We're
it
on
really?
the cusp.
Yeah, and you think it could realistically happen within the next few months?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, look at this situation of Deutsche Bank. All right, Deutsche Bank looks like the new Lehman Brothers. They've got more than 120, 130 trillion in uncollateralized derivatives on their books. Okay, that is many, many, many times the global GDP. So in order to bail them out, you'd have to print not 20 trillion like they did in 2008. You'd have to print 100 trillion in
Wow.
fiat money.
Yeah.
So, okay, now if I'm a wealthy person and there's about $100 trillion sitting in various investment accounts, but from wealthy folks who have investment accounts, right? So if I'm sitting there and I'm thinking all the fiat money world is blowing up, I have really only a couple of choices: gold and Bitcoin. And by the way, gold is not easy to source. It's hard to get $1 billion of gold. You ask China, ask Russia. If they could buy $10 billion worth of gold today, they would, but they can't because it's not available. It's very hard to come by that amount of gold. Okay, look at Bitcoin. Oh, wait a minute. It's 100 billion right now. I can buy 5 billion worth of Bitcoin right now. Okay, price would probably go to 16,000 right away, 17,000 immediately. But so what? I don't care because I'd rather not have 100% of my wealth disappear in a global banking crash, which is have 1 foot through the door on that.
Hmm. It's quite an interesting point, actually, of the ease of access to Bitcoin over gold. I think that's an interesting point that doesn't really get brought up that often because I don't know how many Bitcoin investors actually buy into gold as well. But you're right, buying gold on a large scale must be fairly difficult. It's an interesting point.
It is hard because the gold market is masked to a large degree by the futures trading. In large part, is uncollateralized futures trading or naked short selling. And so there's two things that happen in the gold market. You have another leg down in the global banking crash that started in 2008. So then you have, and by the way, central banks have been buying more gold this year than they have in the past 50 years. So they're big buyers of gold.
Hmm.
And the price hasn't moved, even though you've got central banks, the biggest pockets in the world, buying aggressively. Price is still flat. So it tells you how distorted the price is with all this naked shorting going on. So let's say the banks blow up, and now central banks step up their purchases, and then there's about 3,000 billionaires in the world and 20 or 30 million millionaires in the world. So then they start buying gold, and then that triggers a massive short squeeze on the futures exchange because they have to cover all that gold that they've shorted,
Hmm.
and they've shorted like 5 years of supply of mining exists as a short. So they have to cover that short. So now central banks are buying, the exchanges are covering their shorts, and every mom and pop with two nickels to rub together is trying to buy gold. So there's just not that much supply. It's a very, very thin market in that situation. So it gaps up from the current, let's call it $1,300 an ounce. Suddenly they can't buy any gold under 5,000, 6,000, and then we can't buy any gold under 12,000. There's no gold to buy even at 12,000. You call up your broker and say, I want to buy gold bullion, not the paper derivative type, not the ETF, not GLD that trades on the exchange. I want to buy actual bullion. And they're like, I can get you 5 ounces of gold, but you got to pay 20,000 for it.
Sure.
And you're like, well, you know what? I think I'll just buy Bitcoin.
I mean, so do you see? I mean, gold then is clearly going to be still a competitor in the future, in that estimation.
Gold's not going away.
Mhm.
Gold is still the second most actively traded commodity in the world, and it still is the basis for the balance sheets of every central bank in the world. We have never left a gold standard. We have never left a gold standard. The paper money used is backed now by gold, and the way central banks settle accounts is via gold. They don't settle accounts with paper money; they settle with gold. So the gold standard has never ever left us. No matter what Warren Buffett says,
Mhm.
his dad was a stockbroker, and his dad knew the story of gold. Warren is just a petulant little juvenile who rebelled against his dad and decided to buy worthless paper and go on CNBC and demand beg for bailouts like a crying little bitch. But his dad would be ashamed of him.
Again, some great words on Warren Buffett there. And I think one last question I have to ask you: are you Satoshi Nakamoto?
We are all Satoshi
There we go.
Nakamoto.
That's what I was hoping.
We are the sum. He is the sum total of our intelligence that took hundreds of thousands of years, of millions of years to evolve. And then we are making a stand to survive. Because if we don't have hard money, and if we don't have decentralized, distributed, unconfiscatable, immutable hard money, we're all going to become extinct pretty quickly here.
Mhm.
Because you can't print you can't you know you, if the insect population collapses and the fish population collapse, which they're on the verge of doing, you can't print your way out of that. You can't say, oh, we have no more insects, therefore we have no more fertilization of crops, therefore we have no more food, and there's no fish in the sea either, that the fish stocks are down 90% globally.
Mhm.
So we have no more food, but we have 7 billion people. So what we're going to do is we're going to send everybody a check for $100,000, right? That doesn't solve the problem. But that's the delusion that our central bank Politburo of central planners think is the case. It's amazing that America claims that they won in the Cold War against Russia and then immediately set up their own Politburo in communist dictators at the central bank. So I have to ask you. Meanwhile, Russia is full on capitalist. So you have to ask yourself who really won that Cold War, who really lost that Cold War.
Mhm.
Because America appears to have Bitcoin derangement syndrome. They've gone insane. And Russia has said, Putin has said he said that we missed the internet revolution. We want to be part of the crypto revolution. So they're very forward thinking in Russia, even though their legacy is obviously through central planning. They realize that that's a dead end. Where America believes that central planning is their future, believes that's the solution, which is extraordinary development here in America because it's a recipe for certain existential death.
Mhm. Do you think that Russia would start stocking up on Bitcoin anytime soon?
Yep.
Yeah. Any kind of source for that?
Yep.
Just an idea? Yeah. Care to elaborate?
Nope.
Okay, I thought so. All right. Well, thank you so much, Max. It's been a pleasure speaking to you.
Good luck with Brexit.
Yeah, thank you. Oh, yeah, I'm looking forward to that, seeing that play out.
Yeah, seems like a really well planned out
Oh,
coup.
it's great. It's fun for all of us. I think we're all enjoying it right now. All
I
right.
look forward to Prime Minister Nigel Farage.
Oh God, yeah. I think we'll get Boris Johnson first, unfortunately, but
Oh, great.
even better maybe. Okay, thank you so much, Max.
All
Yeah,
right.
cheers
Bye
again. We'll
now.
speak soon. Bye bye.
All right.